Hi, Tracy.
Hello, Kay. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. We're in the middle of a thunderstorm here. Lots of thunder and lightning and heavy rain and
Wow.
very, very excited dogs.
Oh, goodness. The dogs always feel, well, animals always feel it the most, don't they?
It's really interesting watching their instinct to go to ground. I've had both of my dogs out on the lawn. It's as if they know that that's the safest place for them. It's
Mm,
very strange.
mm,
Yeah.
mm,
So, anyway, we'll attempt
mm.
to chat.
Okay.
So I think we agreed last week that we would talk today a bit about authenticity,
Mm,
and it's a strange one, really, isn't it? Because it's such a big topic. What is authenticity, and how do we know when we're being our most authentic selves? What's your take on the topic, on the term?
mm. I agree. I think it's huge. Um, I'm always interested in coaching terms that it becomes such an important thing for both the coach and the coachee to be authentic in the relationship. And I think I spend quite a lot of my time and energy making sure that I am doing that to the best of my ability, um, because I think that's what serves my clients best. And I think it's surprising the number of people who recognize when others are not being authentic, even though they don't necessarily take any notice, even if they just kind of carry on regardless.
I think there's something really fundamental, and I guess I'm thinking through the happy brain model that somewhere in our primitive brain, in our nervous system, we must have a filter for, am I safe? Is this person aligned, authentic, congruent, whatever word we want to use? So it's almost as if our subconscious filters that very first.
Mm,
And
mm,
I guess it makes really good survival sense to be able to know if somebody's out of alignment with themselves, then perhaps they may not be a safe person or environment to be in.
mm, mm,
I wonder if I'm guessing that there's some really crucial survival mechanism in there that helps us to filter for the congruence and authenticity of another person,
mm,
which I suppose in the first world Western, rich society, we've maybe lost a bit of access to. And
mm,
yeah, I think it's a very strange thing, because it's a word, as you point out, that we strive for in coaching and working with clients, is to bring out the authentic client, and also to be authentic ourselves.
mm, mm. I wonder at what point we as a human race stopped putting so much importance on that. I suppose, are we talking about a gut feeling here? That knowledge, that something that tells us that there's something not quite right here. And yet, a lot of the time, I suppose I can only speak from my own experience and what people have shared with me. A lot of the time, we just put it to one side. And I wonder at what point we became able to survive even though we're not paying attention to that.
Mm. Mm. I think there's an Einstein quote, and I can't for the life of me remember what it is, but it's something about we've kind of confused the brain parts, and we value the rational mind above all else. But
Mm,
actually, there's a great danger in that. If we're in a super safe luxury environment, then yes, the thinking mind is probably all you need, but
Mm.
actually most of us require a huge amount of feedback. I mean, our brains and bodies are amazing amplifiers and feedback systems, biofeedback systems, if we tune in.
Mm.
And I think, I guess we've stopped putting a flashlight into our awareness of that, and yet it makes sense. Most people will know what it feels like to think, oh, there was just something about that person. There was just something, I can't put my finger on it. There was
Mhm.
just something, and
Mhm.
or their words and music didn't align, or
Mhm.
something. And so people understand that, but
Mhm. Mhm.
somehow I guess we've become quite lazy because we haven't had to rely on
Mm.
those feelings.
Mm. Is is there a part, do you think, that's played by us wanting to fit in and therefore not stand out and be the one that stands up to say, oh, actually, I'm not quite so sure. I suppose if you're linking it into episodes that we've seen across the media recently, the starting of the Me Too campaign, and people able to stand up because they feel they're not going to stand out from the crowd because somebody's already done that bit for them. Somebody's already listened to their instinct around authenticity and said, no, this is not okay. So it makes it okay for other people to do that. Whereas I think possibly, many years ago, it was the one that stood up and said, no, hang on a second, this isn't okay. They were the ones that survived. Whereas that's not necessarily the case these days. Do you
Mm.
think there's some social engineering in there almost that's had an impact?
I think that's a very interesting idea. I'm sure that I absolutely believe that we're constantly being engineered socially,
Mm.
and our thoughts and our beliefs are being influenced
Mm.
by the powers that be, through the media and so on. It's another topic of conversation for another day.
Yeah.
But yes, and one of the things I love about working with children and young people is to help them to align with, I might use the term, their truth, their
Mm-hmm.
their strength, their inner power, but actually we're just talking about their authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have to teach it from the very early days. We have to teach people what it feels like when you are fully aligned, when your
Mm-hmm.
mind and your body, your thinking, your emotions, everything feels strong, solid. So in NLP, we talk about the submodalities of certainty as a really important tool. And I think there's just something that we can teach children from an early age to feel that they are being true to themselves in some way, and to recognize when maybe they step out of their authentic self, and that might be appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
It might be appropriate to do that, to
Mm-hmm.
take on a different identity, um, but to recognize the difference,
Mm.
because there is a difference, isn't there?
And that's interesting, the point about almost choosing not to be authentic, because I think being able to put authenticity into context and the world in which we live means that we have to stay safe, and we may sometimes have to make choices which don't necessarily align with our authentic self. Um, but being able to do that on purpose and, as you say, understand the difference and when it's appropriate to do that and when it's not appropriate to do that.
Hmm. And it starts with awareness, doesn't it?
Mm,
I'm a
mm-hmm,
great fan of, I run models in my head to help me to navigate my world and help others to navigate their worlds. And one of my favorite models is like a seesaw where, above the fulcrum there is the still point where, as a child you could stand on a seesaw right in the middle, and you could balance it so that both sides were level.
mm,
Or you could, you know, flip it over to the right or flip it over to the left. And for me, that's a strong metaphor about knowing when we are out of kilter, out of our center point, out of being grounded and strong and true to ourselves, congruent, authentic, all of those words that help us to know what it feels like to be right bang in the center point of ourselves, of our being,
mm,
and also to know what it feels like to be out of balance,
mm,
and therefore know what you need to do to come back into balance,
mm,
because there can't be a right or a wrong here. Nature is all about fluidity and, it's that movement and flow. So sometimes, as you say, sometimes it's okay to be in one out of balance and to flow back into the center point again.
mm. As you as you're talking there, I think I'm gonna not rescind what I said before about moving away from the authentic self, but perhaps it's more about staying authentic, but understanding that sometimes that might not be totally in balance. Am I making sense there? I think I'm using your image of the seesaw, and so if you're not feeling in balance because you're angry or upset or whatever it might be, that actually that's okay, because that actually is how you're feeling at the time. It's about how you manage that that's important. Does that does that does that make sense?
I think so, and that's what we teach in all of our work, isn't it? That
Mm-hmm.
it's bringing your awareness into the physical sensations that let you know that something's not right,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, and challenging your own thoughts about it, because as we've discussed before, when we start to build powerful narratives like, I am an anxious person,
Mm-hmm.
that steals the opportunity of resetting and rebalancing.
Mm-hmm.
And, if we can draw awareness into this sensation, lets me know that right now I'm feeling anxious.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that changes the whole paradigm from I am an anxious person.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something about recognizing, bringing your awareness into the physical sensations, which of course is something that we're very keen to do with happy brain training. I do wonder though about the 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 concept of authenticity, what that might mean to somebody else. If you said to, if we took a straw poll of, I don't know, 10, 12 people, and you said, and we asked them, what is authenticity to you? When do you feel authentic? And when do you feel somebody else is being authentic? It would be really interesting to
Mm-hmm.
hear the various responses.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'd be interested also to know, in addition to when do you feel authentic, how do you know
Mm,
that is the case? What
mm,
and what is it you do? What is it you feel? How do you know that that's actually happening? I'm actually going to have to give that some thought myself, I think, actually. to check out my own. I know when it's happening, but I think I just need to give some more thought to how do I know.
There's something about flow state, isn't there? There's
Mm.
something about just a deep trust and intuition of being in your flow state when you're being true to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I feel it in physically. It feels more grounding. It feels a stronger, more solid energy, as if it's right down through my center, and my voice feels more powerful, and everything is much stiller and calmer.
Mm. Mm. Yes, I like all those descriptions. They ring quite true for me. I think especially the stillness and the calmness. And I think the flow is quite interesting as well, because even in the middle of distress, being authentic means that it almost flows more easily, and even though it might be uncomfortable, it's dealt with more easily than if there's a mismatch between the distress and how I feel or deal with it. And that comes from acknowledging, yeah, it might feel a little bit uncomfortable, but that's okay. That's fine. That's okay. I can live with that. I can deal with that.
I'm thinking about as we were talking a few minutes ago about when we need to step out of authenticity, and how important that may be as again another survival mechanism, really. And being the same as other people is quite an important social thing to be of high value. And I'm reminded of when I was a child, we moved quite a lot, which in the 70s was not such a common thing. And so I was very often the new kid in school, and I was blessed with the skills to be able to hit the ground running. And I guess some of that was to put aside any sense of who I might be and take on the characteristics of the new tribe, so to speak. And I think that's an important skill that's probably held me in good stead for the rest of my life, where I can just pitch up, pitch in, and build rapport very quickly with any social group. But it does take me very often out of being my most authentic self. It's almost as if it takes me to a different, I'll use the word resonance, a different place, just to be the same as other people. And I hear a lot of people say, oh, I just can't wait to get home where I can just kick off my shoes and, do X, Y, or Z. But basically what they're saying is be me. I can be me. And I wonder if that's all part of the authentic package, is and why why a person cannot be themselves in that paradigm if in a wide range of situations. It sounds a bit fluffy, really, I think, but that feels like there are many times when we have to step up and step out, or I'm saying have to, probably just choose to, for reasons that maybe we haven't brought our awareness to.
And I guess those skills are probably learned very young, depending on your environment, as you've described. You probably knew at some really base level that if you didn't, pitch up and pitch in, then actually life could have been a bit tricky for you, and almost learn this. Well, it was your kind of primitive brain that learned how to do that. Your thinking brain possibly didn't even realize that that's what was going on. And I can imagine that there are all sorts of scenarios for people as young people where they have to learn how to do that simply to stay safe, and put to one side, concerns that they might have, or so on, almost until it's safe to revisit them at a later date.
And I think that goes a long way to explain why, or how should I say, a lot of young people have trouble with their identities. They lose themselves, and a lot of the trouble, particularly with teenagers, where they really have. They seem to have lost something, or if they ever had it. Perhaps they didn't need it when they were particularly small. And yet certainly in my experience, when you guide them to a deep knowing, a trust in something deep within them, a signal of, yes, this is right, and that is wrong, something that's solid within them. I'm quite amazed at the number of times when it appears that it's the first time they've accessed that. And it makes me more determined, I guess, to teach that feeling, that skill right up front with small children, so that they use it as an anchor to guide them through difficult times. And because ultimately we want people to make good decisions. And if you've got that little internal check that says, yeah, this is me, this is right.
How do you think people do that naturally? Because I do know people who I can really look at and say, I absolutely trust you, because everything you do and everything you are is authentic, and that's the word that I would apply. There is no gap, there's no side to them. Do you know what I mean? And I'm in speaking to them, I'm not conscious that any of them have had to learn consciously how to do that at a later date. It seems to be an innate something within them that they've been able to hang on to. Maybe that's quite rare.
I know exactly what you mean, and I can think of many people actually and situations where I've experienced that. And I think in my own journey, I recognised that I would prefer to be in the company of somebody who says it like it is.
Yes.
Even if you disagree with them,
Yes.
it doesn't matter. You just get it. And it's like, it's the transparency. I see you. I trust you. I feel safe. We can communicate. Whereas I remember many moons ago being a young mum with a group of other young mums, and there were a couple of psychologists in the group, and I now realise that they were just being all things to all people, just keeping rapport with everyone. But instinctively, I always felt I couldn't grasp them. I couldn't feel a connection to them. I could feel something superficial. And that didn't work for my stress brain. My stress brain needed to know that I wanted to know what they really thought, what they really meant. It's a strange thing. So I do think it goes back to something very primitive in our lower lobes, reptilian brain, mammalian brain, which is saying, I need to feel whether or not I trust you. And from there, then we take the next step.
And I think those people, for me, there's an additional thing. There is that, what you see is what you get, and I'm going to say it how it is. A lot of, I don't know about the numbers, but I can think of people who I know who are like that, who seem to have a way of not offending people when they're like that. And I do feel that a lot of the time when people are not being authentic and not being true to themselves, it's because of this fear, I guess, that many of us have, that we're about to offend someone. If we say, no, we don't want to do something, or say, actually, could we do it like this instead? Or, actually, that felt a bit horrible what you said to me just then, or whatever the situation is. We're worried about offending, aren't we? Whereas there are people who have the skill to be able to say it how it is without offending. Maybe it's because they're not worried about offending, so they just are able to say it. I think there's quite a lot mixed up in there.
I think the whole concept of worrying about offending people has a much deeper root, because I think biologically, if we're probably driven to stay in the tribe and not be rejected by the tribe. So if you've got significant members of the tribe, you wouldn't want to offend them if you felt that you might be ejected. And yeah, it's an interest, that whole thing about imagining what other people think about you. How hardwired that can be. Go right back to roots, can't it?
Yes. I do often polish my crystal ball just to see if I can work out what's going on. Never works, I have to say. Just having the conversation is a much better way of doing it.
I know. But it's good. Again, I think when you just put your own flashlight internally and go, oh yeah, recognize that. That's a pattern. Yeah, recognize that. It takes away the need to label and judge it as being right or wrong. It's, we're all peculiar mixes, aren't we?
Yes, that is very true. That is true.
I think I think it was Carl Jung talked about conscious flexing. And how we are different people in the company of different people. We flex our personalities, our behaviors accordingly. And I think that by and large most of us do that, but we probably can both recognize the people who don't seem to do that. They just seem to be the same person at all times.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say I really admire that, and I model it greatly.
Certainly one of the premises of Myers-Briggs work is that we have those preferences in terms of how we are and how we behave and what exhausts us and where we get our energy and so on. And when we are able to flex as much as we can outside of that is when we will be, I suppose, at our best. And being able to use our energy best, and so on and so forth. And recognizing when we're doing that, when we're stepping outside of our preferences and using it effectively, is a really effective way to be, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, whether it's with friends, or doing any other activity as well. It's quite a powerful thing to be able to do it on purpose.
Yeah, as you're talking, I'm reminded of years of training and teaching, and the differing experiences, or the impacts of different experiences on my I felt like my soul, actually. It wasn't, it was my, my nervous system. But, I could spend a day in a classroom or giving a lecture or training and come away feeling energized and rejuvenated. But equally, I could spend a few hours giving a lecture or training and come away feeling absolutely exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference was when I was trying so hard to win round the hearts and minds of a group or convince them of something that was important to me or to their learning. And the harder I tried, it was almost, I'm kind of thinking it was almost as if I was giving away my energy, my authenticity. It sort of came out of me to go and try and get them and pull them back in. And as a result of it, I was depleted. And if I contrast that with the situations, the training situations where I felt, vitalized and rejuvenated, that was much more about staying down in my deeper energies, back to that feeling of grounded and dare I say, authentic. Everything was coming from a deeper, stronger place rather than maybe an insecure place.
And I wonder which the students appreciated more, got more from.
That's interesting. Something over the years and I'm sure you do this with your training, so I do some kind of evaluation, particularly if I'm working for a corporate or a university or college or something. The evaluations at the end of the trainings, and the one word that I love to see more than anything else. I'm not bothered about the ratings because they are only a measurement in their moment of that emotion. But the word authentic, and I have loved very much, felt very proud when I've had those kind of evaluations and feedback. Kay is an authentic trainer and so on and so forth. And I've often wondered about what that means. It means something to me. I can't necessarily articulate it, except it makes me feel good and proud, and obviously it's ticking something deep within me. But I wonder what it means to the personal people writing it.
Yes, it would be really interesting to, perhaps in response to this chat, to find out what people would say if you ask them not just how do you know when you're doing authentic, but how do you know when someone else is doing authentic, and what is it that tells you that? How do you know that that's where they're coming from?
I like that. That's a really interesting question, isn't it? And I wonder if there's a sort of generic pattern to that, or whether there is a bit of, it's just subjective and even transient according to where they're at in their life, or whether it's something just deeper.
I don't know the answer to that. I guess it was a rhetorical question, but I guess all of that has to influence it, doesn't it? Their people's own experience, the moment, the context, the subject. All of that has to influence it. But I think the nub there of what you're saying is that that's something that's recognised on a much deeper level that we might be conscious of unconsciously, even though we may not be able to explain it.
Yeah, I think that's there's just so much. I think we're just opening up a whole other avenue for discussion.
Well, absolutely, because there's a whole lot of stuff about otherness, isn't there? Not necessarily what we're conscious of or what we see and feel, but what else is happening on that, I suppose you might call it a sixth sense level.
Mm.
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 Mm-hmm.
And you know, again, we often talk about our work with animals and children, but
Mm.
they're so much more in tune
Mm.
with those things, aren't they? I
Mm.
think we touched on this before, but it's like we have a regular visitor to our home who absolutely hates dogs.
Mm.
And we've got two dogs, and the dogs absolutely adore him because he's totally authentic
Yes.
in himself.
Yes.
So he must feel really safe to the
Yeah.
dogs to be around.
And I guess they have no concept of whether or not they like the dogs.
No.
Um, they're just completely congruent and authentic in their
Mm.
dislike.
Do you think there's a difference between congruence and authenticity?
Oh, long pause. Um, I feel that we probably can't be congruent unless we're authentic. How do we know what to match up to in our congruence if we don't know where the authenticity lies? I think I might have just dug a hole for myself there.
Well, I wouldn't know how to answer that question myself. It's probably a little Google search later to find out what's the uh, what's the definition of authenticity? What's the definition of congruence? I know what it means to me,
Mm,
and I know what it means to our line of work. But
mhm,
yeah, I wonder what that is.
good question. Answers on a postcard, as a children's television program used to say.
Uh, yeah,
Mm.
that's a very interesting one. But there's something ooh, it's almost esoteric about being in the presence of a person of any age who is comfortable in their skin,
Mhm.
who you could just sense it, and it's a nice feeling, isn't it?
Absolutely. And those messages come through, I think, on every level. There's a the gut feeling, or however that's described. People talk about being able to see it in their eyes, and ease of movement, a fluidity in what they say. All of that sort of comes together, doesn't it?
Mm.
On every single level, as you made reference to earlier, when we're thinking about the submodalities of it.
Mm. Yeah, that's really interesting. We shall do that next time we're together. We'll maybe play with the submodalities of authenticity and congruence and see what we come up with.
Hmm, that sounds really interesting. Hmm,
That would be a good one, wouldn't it?
definitely, definitely. Hmm.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that um, that in our work people want to find their truth, their inner self, or do you think that people are afraid to discover more about themselves?
I can think of a few clients who have come saying that they feel like they've lost themselves. They feel like that they want to find themselves. What sort of language like that, and that they're looking for their thing in life, their reason for being here, their all of those sorts of things. And there's a sense that they probably haven't lost who they are, but they've sort of lost touch with it. And I'm always quite cautious, because I suppose my instinct is to say, okay, let's do some work to kind of get back in touch with that. But I'm always a little bit cautious as to the reason why they feel they've lost it in the first place, and what would it be like if they found it again. But there's that sort of touchstone that we have in our work, where we have to sort of just try and check out the ecology of the changes that somebody might want to make, and what might the consequences of that be. And I think we've probably both seen clients where they have made changes in their lives, and the unintended consequences of that possibly have been quite massive, whether it's been with their family, move across to the other side of the world, or whatever it might be. So whether there's a fear about finding it, or whether there's just a kind of a healthy, well, I just need to check whether this is an okay thing to do, or at least check that if I do this, I understand what it might mean, and I'm equipped to deal with that. Maybe it's more of a sense of that.
And of course, that reminds us of the importance of the ecology check when we are helping somebody to define a goal or an ambition, a new behaviour. NLP talks about the well-formedness of the outcome, and the ecology check is often the thing that makes or breaks the success. And I guess that's the point at which authenticity kind of kicks in, doesn't it? I'm reminded of a client I worked with many years ago who wanted to lose weight. She was a young mum, very overweight. She came to see me. She wanted to be much slimmer, and as always, at the beginning of the first session, it's just clarifying exactly what her goal, her ambition was, how she would know when she achieved it, what would be the full sensory experience of it, run her up and down a timeline, all of those things that we do at the beginning. And then it came to the ecology check, which was, well, what will happen as a result of what happened to your friends, family, environment as a result of you becoming this, slim, attractive, vibrant new person that you want to be. And at that point, what I would say in this context is her authentic self kicked into place, and she said, well, actually, I'll leave my husband. And at that point, we're up against a barrier, and that just takes us into some other completely different place, because her authentic self was deeply unhappy in her marriage, and her safeguard to keep the family together and do the right thing for the social script and so on was to find a way to keep herself in that place, and becoming undesirable, unattractive, overweight to her, in her opinion, kept her safe. And so then there's the dissonance between her authentic self, desperate to burst through, and her inauthentic self, who was playing by the rules of the rules that she played by.
And I guess it's at that point in the conversation that people may say, yeah, that's definitely where I'm still aiming for. They may change their goal, or possibly have a little bit of a rain check of, yes, that is still my goal, but it's not right to do it right now. It is something, it is a place, I want to go, but the circumstances I'm in are not right to help me achieve it at the moment. And that's a very wise decision, also.
There's so many. My brain's kind of flitting off in lots of different directions. I'm reminded of, years ago, Michael Neal used to send. Maybe he still does. He used to send, or I subscribe to his daily or weekly sound bites, really, for personal development and well-being. And one that struck me was, I think it was about authenticity, actually, and it was who you really are is what you do when there's no one else around.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that is really true, isn't it? If you, you know, if you really are a very different person when you don't have an audience or some kind of social group to interact with, or to feel judged by, or to be judged by, or any of those things,
Mm-hmm.
what actually do you do? Because that is
Mm-hmm.
when you have free reign, that is your authentic self, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Surely.
Mm. And I guess that brings up the issue again about how we kind of live in a context of social, in every sense, what, not just online, but our social groups, whether that's as a mum, as a professional of whatever nature, for me as a horse rider, all of those sorts of things. There is sort of expected norms and behavior,
Mm.
and what happens when we don't have those boundaries anymore. I can think of not that it's ever happened to me, but a really good example of people when they win the lottery, and if they have previously not had a huge amount of money, they have lived their lives in the context of their monetary, kind of boundaries. Suddenly those monetary boundaries don't exist anymore, and what happens then? How does their behavior change? How does their
Mm.
thinking change? All of those sorts of things, because they no longer have that external thing that's helping them to kind of retain their where they are in life, I suppose.
Mm. Yeah, so many ways that we can go with that. I do think that if you want to know a man's true personality, his true truth is to give him everything and see what he does with it.
Mm.
And you
Mm-hmm.
know, I know there are lots of psychological experiments, about sleep deprivation and putting people under stress and all of those things. But actually, I would just do the opposite, because
Mm-hmm.
it's I think it's very revealing.
Mm-hmm.
I guess also alcohol does that to an extent as well. I often think of alcohol as being an amplifier of the true self.
Mm-hmm.
You just get more of
Mm-hmm.
what's in there, except in some situations where people do a Jekyll and Hyde thing, and that suggests to me that they're not being true to themselves. They've got the brakes on. There's some suppressed
Mm-hmm.
set of rules.
Mm-hmm. Well, see, alcohol just makes me want to curl up and read a book. So, yeah, that is the real me.
Oh well, I think I think I don't even know if I dare to tell you how what it might do to me. But
It,
yes, I've always realised it is just there is more or less of what is my essence. And I was speaking to you earlier about a recent experience of being master of ceremonies for an event, and
mm,
that being on stage with the microphone, it takes me right back to being in drama group when I was 12, 13, 14. I loved it, and there's something
mm,
there that just resonates really strongly with me.
mm,
um, and my dad tells the story about my first day at school, where I'm their first child, the eldest, and they nervously dropped me off my first day at school, and they sort of were very anxious, worried parents, and they tiptoed around the corner and looked in through the window of the schoolroom. And there I was at the front of the class, handing out books and telling the children where to go and what to do.
and the rest, they say, is
And I guess over the years I've maybe battled with that realization that that's just my real self. Comes out every now and again.
Mm-hmm.
But to embrace it is a real gift, and it's what I hope that we can do more of with the next generation, helping them to embrace the gifts that they bring to this world, and
to help them acknowledge that others have other gifts equally as valuable. And I think that then goes a long way to people feeling able to be their authentic selves, because they don't feel judged and like they have to be something they're not in order to stay safe.
And that's maybe something for us to chat about on another day. Going back to the problem with teenagers, is the single thing I hear from teenagers who come to see me as clients is their fear of being judged. It's such a brutal filter for them, and therefore they compromise their thoughts, their feelings, their behaviours in order to conform to some ideal that often just creates too much dissonance in the system. And a lot of teenage anxiety, mental, emotional problems are because they are just trying too hard to conform and not be judged. And it's a really depleting activity that occurs in somebody's brain, because actually in order to worry about being judged, they have to be judging that themselves in the first place.
To understand what it is. Yes, absolutely. I think we have quite a list of things that would be really interesting to talk about.
That's great. There's always something to talk about. Tracey, it's been absolutely wonderful as always to shoot the breeze, so to speak, with you, and we've stayed on topic fairly well this time. So
not bad. Always interesting though. Wherever we wander, it's
I know. That's wonderful, and I look forward to our next chat. Hopefully, it'll be very soon.
Lovely.
Thank you, Tracey. Take care.
Look forward to speaking to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.